Hey there, Solaris. If you can hear me, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and wherever you're listening from, I'm glad you made it. Now, get comfortable. This is your next story.
The first hard hit lands on the east employee entrance before I reach the door. Glass pops somewhere ahead of me. Not all the way out, but enough to send a sharp crack through the service hall. I break into a run past the vending alcove, past two cleaners frozen with their carts sideways in the corridor, and round the corner into a wall of noise. Curtis and Lester are braced against the inner door with their shoulders in it. A woman from cosmetics is pulling at Curtis's sleeve and yelling that her sister is outside. Another employee is crying into both hands. Through the narrow glass panel, I see faces jammed into the vestibule, palms slapping, mouths moving, one man down on the tile with people stepping over him to reach the crash bar. I shove the cosmetics manager back, grab the handle, and look through the gap between Lester's arm and the frame. Outside the vestibule, the curb lane is blocked by an ambulance standing crooked across the bus stop. One paramedic is down near the rear doors. The other is backing away from a man who keeps dropping to one knee and lunging up again. A woman in a winter coat is bent over somebody on the pavement. She does not stay bent long. She jerks hard, goes sideways, and disappears under two people piling into her. None of it fits together clean. It looks like a pile-up and a street fight and a medical scene all pushed into one place. Then a face slams into the vestibule glass from the outside, leaves a web of new cracks, and I stop trying to sort it out. Curtis, clear this hall, I tell him. Lester, hold the frame. Nobody touches this door unless I say it. I key my radio and call dispatch. Yara picks up on the first burst. I tell her to lock east employee access from the board, pull every east exterior camera to the main screen, and start a head count by zone. She starts asking what happened. I cut her off and tell her I need maintenance at east service with chain, carts, plywood, and tools. Then I tell everybody in that hallway to move back to the intersection. The cosmetics manager tries to get around me again. I catch her by the forearm and tell her if this door opens, her sister is not the only one staying outside. That gets through to her. She covers her mouth, stares through the glass one more time, then backs up on her own. The outer vestibule panel gives at the bottom first. A hand comes through the split and scrapes across the floor tile, hunting for the inner threshold. Lester swears and leans harder into the frame. Curtis returns with Sunita Rao from maintenance pushing a flat cart loaded with chain, two battered plywood scraps, a cone stack, a 5-gallon bucket of tools, and one yellow case light. Sunita takes one look and says, "This entrance is dead." I tell her I need 2 minutes. She says I have one. We drop the plywood over the inner glass, jam the flat cart against it, thread chain through the pull handles low and high, and lock both runs while the whole door bucks in short hits from the other side. Sunita works fast and low, hands already black from grease and dust. Curtis finally gets useful and drags a rolling laundry bin across the hall for the fallback barrier. The plywood shudders once, twice, then holds. It will not hold forever. We fall back 20 yards to the service intersection and turn it into a choke point. Laundry bins on one side, freight dolly on its side across the middle, a stack of empty water jugs on the other side until somebody brings heavier weight. One of the cleaners asks if she should go home. I look at her, then at the radio traffic stacking over itself, and tell her home is not a direction right now. She nods once and starts stripping bags out of her trash cart so we can use the cart for supplies. That is the first good decision I see from somebody who is not security or maintenance. I send Curtis to pull every guard he can still reach off public patrol and bring them through service only. I send Lester to check the restrooms, vending cutout, and janitor closet for anybody hiding or passed out. Then I tell Sunita I want more chain, more locks, gloves, lanterns, and anybody from maintenance who is sober and upright. By the time I get a clean breath to think, the radio is finished as a source of order. One guard at West Transit says people are hitting the glass with shoes and fire extinguishers. A tenant manager near Center Court says shoppers are crawling under half-closed gates. Somebody from food service says a cook went down in the kitchen and came up biting. Another voice I do not know keeps shouting for police and giving the wrong corridor numbers. None of that helps. I do not need theories. I need one look at the public side before I decide what sections we stop trying to save. I grab Curtis, who has returned with Gus Reddick from maintenance, and cut north through a side hall toward the nearest concourse edge. Gus smells like stale beer and winter air, but he is steady enough to walk. He was asleep in a restroom an hour ago after drinking with his brother, and now he is the best extra body I have. He knows the service side of this mall better than half the managers on payroll. We reach the door to North Concourse and ease it open 2 inches. The whole open floor beyond it feels exposed the second I see it. Music is still playing from one clothing store. Ad screens are glowing. A stroller is tipped over by a kiosk. A man is on his knees at a shutter gap with both hands wedged under the metal while somebody inside tries to haul him through. A woman runs past with one shoe missing and slams shoulder first into a bench. Then I catch movement on the upper level. 3 figures at the rail, all facing the same direction, all quiet. One loose sign drops from somewhere near them and clatters on the lower tile. All 3 heads turn at once, then all 3 start moving toward the nearest escalator. Curtis shifts forward, ready to do something dumb, and I yank him back behind the wall. There is nowhere to stand out there that does not show your full body from 20 angles. The man at the shutter goes down before the people inside can pull him through. I shut the door and radio Yara. I tell her to send one clear message to every tenant, cleaner, guard, stock worker, and manager still carrying a radio or near a landline. Stay off the public concourses, close gates, kill music if the panel is inside reach, move through service only. Mark occupied rooms at eye level with paper, tape, cardboard, anything big enough to see in low light. I repeat it slower the second time. People start breathing harder when instructions come in fast. I need them moving, not guessing. We set up the first useful hold in the old receiving office near Anchor Store 6. Piper Huang, one of the stock leads from the department store, has already blocked the door with 2 filing cabinets and a pallet of boxed hangers. She lets us in after I give the call phrase Yara set for verified staff. Inside, I find 12 people packed into a room meant for 4 desks and 1 copier, 4 sales workers, a janitor, 2 kitchen closers, 3 maintenance men, 1 woman with a boy old enough to understand more than I want him to. Leah Bako from the first aid kiosk is on the floor beside a kitchen worker named Roland, who has his forearm wrapped in dish towels and shipping tape. She lifts the edge of the towel, looks at me once, and says she needs water, a clean surface, and a room where nobody brushes past him. I tell Piper to start a written list. Full name, job, injury, who is missing, where he or she was last seen. The list gets people facing one direction. Sunita joins us again with more tools, 3 radios, a case of batteries, and bad news from the east side. The outer barrier there held for a few minutes. Then somebody in another hall hit a crash bar during a panic and let noise and bodies into a connector we had not sealed. East employee access is gone. 1 parking link is gone too. I spread a paper map across the desk and start marking sections in red. East service, east parking connector, lower transit link, center rotunda, aquarium hall, north public concourse. Curtis asks where all the trapped staff are supposed to go if I keep crossing things out. Gus leans over the map and taps Anchor Store 6 with a grimy fingernail. Closed department store, heavy walls, deep stock rooms, service hall on one side, loading dock at the rear, manual interior gates on 2 of the employee entries. 1 public glass face we can cover if we move fast. I tell Sunita, Gus and Curtis to come with me. We are taking the store. The sweep through the Anchor takes close to 40 minutes, and none of it feels safe. Emergency lights give us a dirty yellow path through dead escalators, stripped display tables, dark fitting rooms, office cubicles, and stock aisles packed with cartons. We move 1 zone at a time, check under racks, check behind pallets, check restroom stalls with the door edge, not a hand. In the manager office we find a teenage shoe clerk asleep on a pile of returns after taking cold medicine and missing half the radio calls. In 1 restroom, we find an older stock woman locked in a stall clutching her purse with both hands. She opens only after Piper calls through the door twice. In a receiving cage, we find 1 man on the floor who is too far gone to help and too close to one side of the gate for me to risk opening it. Gus pulls the cage shut and keeps walking. Nobody argues. By the time we reach the public front, 6 of them are already outside the glass in the mall corridor, drifting near the entrance every time one of us kicks a hanger or shifts a rack too hard. That front glass decides the rest. If we use this store, the public face has to disappear before the concourse fills. We move fast after that. Display shelves come down and turn sideways into a barrier wall. Blanket packs, cardboard backers, plywood scraps, and old sale signage go over the glass from the inside. Shoe benches brace weak points at the base. The store changes shape with every trip through it. The polished front floor stops being retail space and turns into dead ground we do not plan to stand on. The bedding section becomes sleeping space. Bridal stock becomes the room for Dana Mercer and her son. One office becomes medical hold. Another becomes quarantine. Winter coats go into one aisle. Flashlights, power banks, bottled drinks, and dry snacks go into another. People calm down once they can carry, sort, stack, and tape. When they have nothing to do, they stare at doors and start asking for answers I do not have. At 12:40-something, Roland crashes out of the folding chair in the receiving office and slams shoulder first into the copier. Leah clears the room before I finish turning at the sound. Piper grabs the desk and drags it sideways. Curtis shuts the hall door. Roland gets one hand on Leah's wrist when she reaches for the bandage tray, and Piper breaks that grip with a stapler to the knuckles. I get the office chair between him and Leah, but he comes off the floor harder than a sick man should. He does not answer when I call his name. He makes a short sound through his teeth and lunges at the nearest movement. Leah yells for cord. Piper throws it. Curtis and I drive Roland back into the desk edge, pin one arm, then the other, and bind him into the chair while it skids across the tile. He keeps trying to stand with the chair half under him. He is not trying to talk anymore. When we finish, nobody in that office needs a debate about exposure policy. I step into the hall and tell everybody the new rule in plain words. Any bite, any fresh blood to the eyes or mouth, any deep contact wound from one of these things, immediate isolation, no family exception, no friend exception, no manager exception. Leah stands behind me with blood on one sleeve and says if anybody hides contact, he or she sleeps outside the main zone. One maintenance man starts arguing that we are locking sick people away. Gus tells him the public concourse is open if he wants a second opinion. The man shuts up. Dana pulls her son closer and backs toward the bridal stockroom. Piper starts marking doors on the map with a thick black pen. Sunita brings chain for the quarantine rooms. While she is threading the first lock, Yara comes over radio and says the main security office is gone. One injured guard turned there, forced a scramble through the back stair, and broke up dispatch. She is moving toward Anchor 6 through upper service with one dispatcher and a jewelry clerk who cannot put full weight on one leg. I tell her to keep the radio off unless she needs a door code. Every burst from that speaker is bringing more of them to the front glass. We work through the next hour with the store half dark and stripped down to function. Gus and the maintenance men seal side entries with chain and dead carts. Sunita checks what doors can take screws, what doors need braces, and what doors are already weak from old warping. Piper takes the head count 3 times until everybody in the store is either logged or being searched for. Curtis runs cases of bottled water, power banks, candy bars, crackers, socks, gloves, and batteries from nearby locked shops through the service hall with another guard named Felix Weller. Leah sorts first aid stock on the copier lid and starts separating what is useful from what only looks useful. The mother folds coats into a bed for her son without asking for anything else. When Yara finally arrives with her small group, mud on her slacks and one battery case hugged to her chest, she looks past me into the store and sees what we have turned it into. She does not waste time with questions. She sits at the desk, pulls the log sheet over, and starts taking names. I move around the desk while Yara writes and starts splitting the store into jobs, doors, and hours. The emergency lights throw a weak yellow wash across the stock hall, and every face looks older in it. I hand Piper the master sheet and have her mark 3 columns at the top: present, missing, isolated. Leah gets 1 office and 1 table for medical only. Gus takes Arlen Crow and Russ Dugan from maintenance and starts on side entries with chain, carts, and whatever shelving will hold weight without tipping on us. Sunita walks every service door with a flashlight and grease pencil, marking the hinges that can take screws and the frames already warped from years of heat and cold. Curtis and Felix make runs through the nearest locked shops for water, socks, power banks, flashlights, and anything dry we can carry without rattling. Dana tucks her boy into the bridal stockroom and comes back out asking what she can do. I put her on blankets, coats, and spare clothes. Nobody stands around if I can help it. Roland does not settle down in the office. He keeps throwing the chair against the tile in short bursts that travel farther than I want through the stock hall. Leah checks him twice in 10 minutes and comes back with less to say each time. First she tells me his pupils are not tracking right. Then she tells me he is not responding to his own name. The third time she comes out holding the doorknob in one gloved hand and says that room cannot stay beside intake. I pull Piper off the log for a minute, open the map again, and shift quarantine deeper into the fitting room corridor where we can chain the approach and use the service counter as a hard stop if one room fails. Moving Roland takes 4 of us, 2 lengths of cord, and 1 rolling office chair with a busted wheel. He fights every turn of the corridor without speaking a word. When we get him into the new office, Sunita runs chain through the handles, screws a steel plate over the strike side, and tells me that door is now stronger than most of the ones keeping the public out. Once quarantine is moved, I start counting what will end us first if we pretend this place can support a crowd. Water is the top line. Bottled stock from the first scavenging runs gives us less than 2 days if people drink like a normal work shift and less than 1 if anybody starts washing with it. The break room sink still runs, which buys time, but nobody knows how long city pressure holds or what shape the lines are in outside. Gus says the anchor has 2 water heaters, several restroom tanks, a janitor supply sink, and 1 cafe prep sink near the old cosmetics counter. None of that solves much. It only means we can fill containers before pressure drops. I send Felix and Dana to pull every bucket, cooler, stock bin, mop pail, trash can liner, and clean tote they can find. I tell them to scrub the inside of each one before it gets water. Leah overhears and adds that anything for medical stays separate and marked. That goes on the board too. The next problem is light. Emergency strips stay on in the hall, but the front half of the sales floor is too bright from spill. Every glowing panel near the public glass tells the ones outside where to gather. Sunita and Arlen start walking the breaker sub-panels for this anchor, shutting down whatever will not cripple us. 1 panel kills music, another drops half the decorative floor lighting, a third takes out 2 charging stations, and 1 digital ad wall that nobody had noticed was still cycling behind the blanket cover. Each time a section goes dark, the store gets quieter and harder to move through. People stumble more. Carts bang into end caps, voices go up by reflex, then come down when they hear how far sound carries. I make everybody stop what he or she is doing for 30 seconds and listen. The floor answers with soft drags, 1 loose panel ticking in the ceiling, and 3 separate thumps from the covered glass at the public front. Nobody needs a speech after that. They go back to work with less noise. At close to 3 in the morning, I take the first real supply run outside the anchor. Not to the food court, not to the main halls. I keep it tight. Me, Curtis, Felix and Gus, with 2 rolling racks stripped down to bare frames and a hand truck with rubber wheels. We head through the service corridor toward a cluster of locked employee-only rooms behind a sporting goods chain and a vending alcove that still has bottled drinks inside. Sunita wants to come, but I need her in the anchor checking doors while we are gone. Piper stays with Yara and the count sheet. I make Curtis repeat the route before we open the side hall, anchor 6 rear hall, left at the linen cage, through the dark prep corridor, past the inactive ATM room, then the service doors behind sporting goods. No public sightlines, no radios unless we lose each other or a door code changes. He repeats it back clean enough. Then we go. The service side is not safe. It only looks safer when you compare it to the concourse. In the dark, with half the utility lights gone, it turns into a chain of blind corners, steel doors, stacked pallets, and echo. Gus walks in front with the flashlight pointed low and 1 hand on the map folded in his pocket. The first stretch goes fine. We pass a locked linen cage, a silent break area, and 1 janitor closet with the door hanging partly open. At the corner before sporting goods, Felix lifts a hand and points. A cleaner in a blue smock is standing in the middle of the next hall with one shoe off and both hands hanging loose. She is facing away from us toward the vending machines. A second later, one of the loose spiral shelves inside the machine settles with a faint metal tick. Her head turns toward it so fast the motion looks forced. Then she starts walking that way. Curtis brings his flashlight up by instinct. I push it down before the beam hits her full in the face. Light is not the issue, noise is. Gus slides past me, takes a mop handle from the closet, and hooks the cleaner's ankle from behind the second she reaches the vending machine glass. She goes down hard. Felix and I get the closet door open. Together we drag her inside and slam it shut before she can get back up. The handle to that door takes chain. We leave the chain. Nobody talks for the next minute. The only sound is the closet door hitting from inside in flat, steady beats. Not panic, not pleading, just motion. I crouch by the vending machines and pry every bottled drink, snack box, and canned coffee I can reach with the maintenance key ring Gus found in his pocket. Curtis loads them into the stripped rack faster than I expect from him. Felix takes the service door into the sporting goods stockroom and comes back with cartons of socks, thermal underwear, fleece caps, and hand warmers. No weapons, no miracle gear, just clothing and shelf goods, which is what a real store keeps after close. We are halfway through the second rack when one of the snack boxes slips from Curtis's hands and hits the tile. The sound is not loud by day standards. Down here it carries. We freeze. From somewhere farther up the service hall comes a drag, then another. Gus hisses one word and points us back the way we came. We do not wait to see what answers that sound. We get back to the anchor with both racks. One hand truck, and one extra problem. The flat beats from the chained closet followed us partway in my head, and now I hear the same rhythm coming from deeper in our own store. Roland is hammering his chair into the office wall again, harder this time, and every burst makes people look up from work. Leah has already moved 2 of her supplies farther away from quarantine without being told. Dana has her boy out of the bridal stockroom and tucked into a corner behind bedding pallets where he cannot hear the worst of it. Yara has the missing list spread out beside the head count and a second sheet labeled tools. She tells me the running total stands at 36 present, 9 missing, 1 isolated from direct contact, which is Roland, and 3 possible staff locations worth checking if we get a clean route west. One of those locations is the bakery prep rooms. The second is a watch repair kiosk closed behind steel. The third is a cleaning hub with a landline that rang through to dispatch before the batteries died. I look at the time on the office wall clock and tell her west can wait until daylight if the route stays inside service. That is not caution. That is math. I need the first dawn to show me what this building is doing outside. The water collection turns the stock hall into a mess of labeled containers, open lids, and wet boots. Dana, Felix, and one of the sales workers named Rena Solberg scrub bins with hot water from the break sink while Piper marks each container with tape. Drinking only, medical only, washing hands, laundry if we ever get that far. The restroom faucets run thin but steady. Gus drains the heater tank from the service closet into 2 mop pails and says we can get more from the second tank once the first goes cold. Sunita keeps a written count clipped to her belt and crosses off every container she sees people dipping hands into without asking. That becomes a problem fast. One stock guy named Trevor Dale rinses his face in the first clean bucket he sees, and Piper tears into him so hard he drops the bucket and nearly cracks it on the floor. He starts yelling back. I step between them, put Trevor on latrine duty, and tell Piper to keep the bucket count moving. This is how the group starts showing itself. Not in speeches, in who follows a sign on a container and who thinks signs are for somebody else. When grey light finally starts seeping around the edges of the blanket wall over the public front, I take Sunita and Gus up to the roof access. I want the vent branch shut that is leaking warm air into the concourse, and I want one look over the lots before anybody starts promising rescue or evacuation. The stair to roof 3 is narrow, concrete, and cold enough that our steps sound sharper than they should. At the top landing, the crash bar is chained from our side, which helps nobody if the roof is already lost, but Gus cuts it loose and opens in short increments anyway. The wind hits the door first, then the cold, then the smell from outside. Exhaust, wet pavement, smoke from somewhere beyond the west lots. and the raw bite of winter air pushing over a building too big to hide from weather. We step out one at a time and stay low by habit even though nothing on the roof is shooting at us. The parking fields spread out grey and white with abandoned vehicles jammed at strange angles. Some are nose to tail at the ramp exits. Some are left with doors open. I see movement in small pockets near the bus lanes and the outer ring road. Not crowds, not swarms. Pairs, singles, and knots of slow motion circling around sound and heat. Sunita leads us along the gravel and maintenance pavers to the air handling units that serve our anchor. The one Gus pointed out sits above the front sales floor, with a side duct branch running toward the concourse ceiling chase. Sunita kneels by the access panel, muttering part numbers under her breath, and works the manual damper with both gloved hands while I keep watch along the roof edge. From up there, I can see that the center court skylight over the main rotunda is cracked in two places. One panel is fully out, a black hole in the roofline with thin ice crusted around the frame. If weather gets into the main court long enough, half that public side will turn into wet tile and broken footing. That does not help us today. It may help later when the interior starts trapping sound and traffic in ugly ways. Gus spots another issue before I do. One of the rooftop stair enclosures from the east wing has its lower service door hanging open below. That means somebody used it after lock sequence or forced it during the panic. We mark it on the roof map and leave it for now. I am not splitting 3 people on a roof with this much building under us. On the way back from the air unit, Gus stops at the parapet and looks down into the truck court behind our dock. 2 trailers are backed into unused bays. One box truck sits crooked across the service lane with its rear door partly open. Nothing is moving in that yard. No workers, no drivers, no visible infected either. The stillness bothers me more than if I saw 6 of them shuffling around the trailers. It means the yard is either clean for the moment or too quiet to explain. I start mapping what is in reach there. Palletized water maybe, cleaning supplies maybe, dry stock if one of the food deliveries came in and never got received. Propane cylinders for forklifts if maintenance has not already emptied the cage. Every one of those things is worth a trip. Every one of those things can also trap us behind a bay door if the yard turns. Sunita finishes the damper and says the vent leak will drop now, but shutting more of the branch could starve our anchor of heat later. I tell her we take the noise reduction and keep the rest for cold. She nods and wipes her hands on a rag black with grease. When we get back down, Yara has new information and less voice left in her throat. Before the last dispatch handset died, a West food service line rang through from the bakery prep rooms behind the upper food court. She answered once, and only once. The caller was a woman named Wanda Cates, bakery manager. She had 6 people with her when she called. 1 with a busted ankle, 1 with a bad burn from a fryer spill during the first rush, and dry storage in the room. She also had a lockable prep door, no exterior windows, and no idea if the service route west was open. Yara wrote the room number, door code, and nearest fire pool location on the back of a tenant memo, and slid it across the desk to me before I even ask. Leah comes over when she hears bakery. She says if the prep room still holds, there may be burn dressings, sterile water, flour, yeast, sugar, oil, and a commercial sink with pressure. Piper says we do not have space for 6 more people. Gus says space gets tighter after starvation too. Nobody needs longer than that. I stand over the map and work the route with my finger while Piper keeps reading names from the missing list under her breath. The cleanest path runs upper service from Anchor 6, cuts through the seasonal storage hall, passes behind the watch repair corridor, crosses the old cinema utility link, then drops into the food prep service lane above the public food court. No main concourse exposure if the fire doors along the route are intact. There are 5 doors with keypad access and 1 alarmed push bar near the utility stair. The rescue team cannot be large. Too many feet. Too much noise. I take Curtis, Felix, Gus, and Leah. Leah argues once, short and flat, that she should stay with the medical station. I tell her if we bring back a burn, a fracture, and whatever else the bakery has, I need the person who can sort injuries before panic does. Sunita stays in charge of the anchor shell with Piper and Yara. I write 3 fallback times on the whiteboard by the office door. If we do not check in by the last one, they do not come looking. They lock down tighter and hold. Before we leave, I tighten the watch rotation. Dana takes half an hour on the bridal stockroom corridor with a flashlight and one whistle. Jeanette, the cleaner, covers the water station. Arlen and Russ split the dock hall and fitting room checkpoint. Piper controls intake, ration logging, and any decision involving food until I get back. Yara keeps the door log, time marks, and what little communications we have left. I do not dress any of that up with talk about leadership. I say who does what and make each person repeat it once. Then I walk the quarantine corridor one more time. Roland is quiet now. The chained office door stands closed. The silence bothers me more than the banging did. Leah notices where I am looking and says, quiet might mean he is down. I tell her I am not opening that room with 5 minutes to departure. She does not push. She only adds an X on the door with black marker and writes no entry under it. We leave the anchor at a little after 6 with 2 hand lanterns, 1 pry bar, 1 bolt cutter, 2 utility carts, and enough tape to mark turns on the return route if we have to run without talking. I keep the lead. Gus stays right behind me with the keyring and route notes. Leah walks center with the empty medical tote and a folded blanket over one arm for a makeshift splint. Curtis and Felix handle the carts. The first several doors go clean. The seasonal storage hall is full of boxed artificial trees, promotional banners, and plastic snow displays stacked to the ceiling. Half the boxes have been knocked over already by people cutting through in the dark. We move sideways through the gap instead of trying to clear it. At the watch repair corridor, the door code Yara wrote fails on the first try. Gus wipes dust off the pad, tries again slower, and gets it. Beyond that point, the building changes. More dropped stock, more abandoned carts. 1 pair of shoes left in the middle of the hall without the person who wore them. A maintenance radio on the floor near the cinema link clicks static once and dies. Nobody touches it. The alarmed push bar near the utility stair almost ruins the whole run. The service hall doglegs around a shuttered arcade and ends at a steel door with a red bar across it. The card reader beside it is dead. The alarm box above the frame has a tiny green light, which tells me the local battery still holds charge. If that bar moves, the siren in the ceiling goes off and we lose the corridor. Gus crouches under the latch side, tries a maintenance override key, and shakes his head. No bite. Sunita would have loved the problem. I do not have Sunita. I do have 1 narrow gap between the frame and wall where the conduit enters. Gus digs through his pocket, comes up with a flat screwdriver and 1 bent piece of wire, and works by touch for almost 2 minutes while nobody behind him moves a shoe on the tile. When the green light dies, he leans his shoulder into the door and opens it 2 inches at a time. Curtis grins at him. Gus does not grin back. He says we are closing this one behind us and taking another route home if we can. The food prep service lane smells like old fryer grease, yeast, mop tile, and something sour coming from a drain that lost flow hours ago. It is darker there than the anchor side, which helps and hurts at the same time. Less spill light, more blind corners. We pass the first kitchen loading niche with no movement. At the second, Leah catches my sleeve and points to the floor. A line of blood smears leads under a locked prep door marked noodles. No footsteps back out. I leave it. Past that, we hear 1 voice before we see the bakery door. Not shouting, counting. 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, 3. Wanda Cates is using the count to let whoever is inside know she is still awake and in control. I tap the metal twice. Wait, then give the code phrase Yara and I agreed on in the security office before we lost it. The deadbolt pulls back almost at once. Wanda opens 6 inches, sees my vest, then the group behind me, and lets us in. The bakery prep room holds more people and less order than I want. Wanda stands in flour-dusted clogs with a sheet pan in both hands, and does not lower it until Leah says her name. 2 young workers are tucked behind the mixer bank with bags of sugar piled around them into a wall. An older dishwasher named Bruno Salvi sits on an upside-down bucket with his right ankle already swelling through 2 rolled towels and a strip of apron cloth. 1 woman, Harpreet Gill, has a wrapped forearm and blistered hand from hot oil. A stock runner named Joel Avery keeps pacing the room in 3-step passes from sink to freezer and back. He wants to go to the cinema wing for his brother. Wanda says his brother already ran when the first rush started and never came back. Joel says Wanda did not see that. The argument is not loud. It is constant. I shut it down by giving everybody 1 minute. Water off, loose metal down, bags tied shut. Grab only what can be carried without spilling noise into the hall. We are not moving 6 bodies if 6 bodies are dragging coffee urns and mixer bowls. Wanda has done one thing right beyond staying alive. She stacked dry goods by weight and packed 2 ingredient bins with sealed flour, sugar, yeast, salt, and boxed drink syrup before opening the door for us. There are also cases of bottled tea under the sink base, burn supplies in a first aid cabinet, and 3 clean aprons Leah cuts into bandage slings for Harpreet's arm. Bruno cannot walk. Leah splints the ankle with 2 cardboard cake rounds, a folded blanket strip, and tape while I hand Joel one end of the utility cart and tell him if he wants his brother alive. He starts by getting the people in this room back through a route I know is open. Joel looks like he wants to argue. Then he looks at Bruno trying to stand on 1 foot and says nothing. Wanda keeps the sheet pan in hand until I hand her the second cart and tell her that tray does more for us flat under supplies than in a swing. She slides it into the cart base without comment. We get almost halfway back before one selfish move costs us quiet. The seasonal hall bottlenecks at a double stack of artificial tree cartons. I send Curtis through first with 1 cart, then Leah and Bruno, then Wanda and the others. Joel is last on my side of the choke point when he jerks away and says his locker is 20 feet down a side alcove. I tell him no. He says there are keys and his inhaler in there. I tell him no again, sharper. He goes anyway. Not a full run. 3 quick steps and a grab at the locker room door. The metal bench outside tips when he clips it with his shin. It hits the floor and skates across concrete with a scream that travels through the whole hall. Everybody stops at once. Then from beyond the cinema link comes the answer. Feet dragging, 1 body hitting a shutter, then more than 1. Curtis starts hauling the first cart without waiting for instructions, which is the only smart move available. I grab Joel by the back of his jacket as he comes off the locker door and throw him into the gap after the others. The retreat is ugly, tight, and louder than I want, but it holds together. Felix gets the second cart around the stacked boxes by lifting the rear end and walking it sideways. Harpreet nearly drops when 1 wheel catches in a broken display base, and Leah keeps her upright by the elbow while never letting go of Bruno's cart. Gus reaches the dogleg first and throws the dead utility radio lying there across the opposite hall. It hits a shutter 40 feet away with a flat bang. The movement behind us turns toward that sound, long enough for Curtis to rip open the silent push-bar door and wave the first cart through. I get Joel over the threshold with 1 hand still on his jacket. Felix comes in backward, dragging the second cart, and takes a shoulder into the frame hard enough to drop him to 1 knee. I slam the steel door, and Gus throws the chain loop through the crash bar brackets before the first hit lands on the other side. The frame jumps, then it holds. Nobody speaks until the second hit comes, and the green light above the alarm box stays dark. By the time we reach Anchor 6 again, the store has changed while we were gone. The blanket wall at the public front is thicker. 2 mattress displays are turned on their sides to block the bridal stockroom corner. Dana's boy is awake and sitting with his shoes on. Piper has a ration grid taped beside the intake desk and a list of inventory categories under it in pencil. Water, dry food, first aid, batteries, heat, tools, cloth, trash bags, cleaning. Yara has added 1 more column to the log. Route status. Sunita meets us at the side entry with a screwdriver in 1 hand and a face that tells me she has already had to solve something. We move the bakery group inside fast, bag outer layers that touched corridor floors, wash hands and forearms at the service sink, and separate the injured to Leah's office before anybody gets near bedding. Wanda takes the process without complaint. Joel does not. He starts asking why we are treating them like contamination before they even sit down. Piper points at the chained quarantine corridor and tells him to save breath or leave. He shuts up for the moment. Leah works through the new injuries with hard efficiency. Harpreet's burns are painful, ugly, and limited to forearm and hand. Bruno's ankle is bad but closed. Joel has bruised ribs from the panic shove and a cut on his knuckle from the locker room door. Leah cleans it, tapes it, and tells him that hand stays away from shared water. Wanda is exhausted but unhurt. 2 younger bakery workers, Kit Rowe and Sienna Reeve, are more shaken than injured, and collapse onto bedding the second Dana and Jeanette spread it for them. The dry goods go into the new ration zone beside the winter coats. Piper weighs the flour bins by hand and mutters numbers under her breath. She does not smile. The hall is good for baking if we can make heat without turning the mall into a signal beacon. It is not good for long storage once moisture gets in. Yara updates the total present to 42. Seeing the number written makes the space feel smaller. I make one more rule on the spot. Nobody claims private stock without logging it. Not food, not batteries, not medicine, not clothing. If it came through the perimeter, it belongs to the group until assigned. The city water pressure begins to fail around late morning. It does not stop all at once. The sink in the break area coughs air, spits rust, then runs thin. The restroom line falls to a trickle. Gus gets a wrench on the second water heater drain and fills another pair of containers before that feed goes lukewarm too. After that, the whole anchor changes mood. People stop asking for wash water. They start looking at the bucket labels. Dana cuts up fabric from returned bath towels into hand-cleaning cloths. Jeanette starts a dirty cloth bin and a cleaner cloth bin. Leah puts 2 bottles of sterile water under the medical table and tells Piper to write, "Do not touch on both," even though nobody there can miss the meaning. I send Curtis, Felix and Rena to strip every restroom tank in the anchor and the nearest service halls, one at a time, with lids lifted carefully and water filtered through clean shirts into marked bins. Nobody is happy doing it. Nobody argues. A mall gives you clean finishes, polished tile, climate control, and 1,000 fake signals of order. When the line's thin, you see what it actually is. Pipes, drains, wiring, doors, and people trying not to waste what is left. The first fight over food starts before noon. Trevor Dale, the same stock guy Piper caught at the waterline, gets caught again, this time with 3 energy bars and a power bank tucked inside a folded winter coat behind the bedding pallets. Piper finds him while she is resorting coat sizes for sleeping layers. He tries to say he was holding them aside for the night watch. Piper knows the ration marks on every carton and calls him a liar before I even cross the aisle. Trevor swings his hands wide and knocks a stack of boxed pillows into the walkway. Dana pulls her boy clear. Curtis starts toward Trevor fast, looking for a chance to prove something after the botched retreat with Joel. I stop Curtis with one arm and deal with Trevor myself. I put the bars and power bank on the table, make Trevor empty his pockets in front of everyone close enough to see, then put him on waist duty and front blanket inspection with Jeanette. That means carrying soiled buckets, checking the public barrier for tears, and sleeping last. He starts to protest. I tell him he can do the work inside or go argue with the people outside the front wall. He takes the duty. The watch rotation slips in small ways once fatigue hits. People do not fall asleep standing up. They miss a second sound. They take longer to answer a whisper. They sit for 1 minute and stay there 5. Around early afternoon, Dana's whistle gives one short blast from the bridal stockroom corner. I reach her before the second one. She points at the blanket wall over the public front. There is no full breach, only movement where there should not be movement. One of the blankets has loosened at the bottom from repeated brushing, and a narrow strip of daylight is showing under the shelf wall. Through that strip I see shoes, then fingers pressing flat under the gap, working at the edge where cardboard meets tile. I get Trevor, Gus, and Curtis on the barrier in seconds. We slide one more display unit against the weak point, screw a backboard across the base, and feed wire through the shelf feet so the whole thing moves as one piece. Nobody on the public side stops touching the gap while we work. They keep feeling along the edge whenever a screw bites or a shelf leg scrapes. That is when Gus says it for the first time. "Listeners," he mutters. They keep coming to what they hear. The name sticks before I decide whether I like it. Roland's office stays quiet through all of that, which starts getting under my skin in a way the banging never did. After the barrier repair, I take Leah down the quarantine corridor with one lantern, one pry bar, and Gus at our backs. We do not open the office. We listen at the door first. Nothing, not even the drag of a chair leg. Leah kneels and checks the shadow line at the floor. No feet, no motion. Gus taps the frame once with the pry bar. No answer. I do not trust silence after what we saw in the receiving office. I also cannot leave an unknown a few yards off the sleeping zone forever. Sunita gets called over. She studies the frame, the plate she added, and the screws anchoring the handle chain, then says the top hinge side has started to pull from the repeated impact. Not enough to fail on its own. Enough that if Roland tipped the chair and worked one side low against the weak point, the whole frame could spring without giving us warning. We build a second barrier in front of that office on the spot, service counter on its side, 2 rolling racks wired to the legs, and a hard stop line nobody crosses alone. That second barrier saves us an hour later. The first sign is not a scream. It is a sharp wood snap from inside the office, followed by one hard impact that shoves the chain slack enough to show daylight at the latch edge. Dana hears it from halfway across the bedding zone and gets her boy behind a mattress display before anybody tells her to. The second impact tears the top hinge screws out of the old office frame. The door does not fly open. It hangs crooked for half a second. Then Roland and the chair come through together in a mess of bent metal, cord, and office splinters. The service counter Sunita made us set stops him cold for 1 beat. Then the chair legs catch under it, and he starts forcing the whole jam forward inch by inch. Curtis rushes it from the side with a rolling rack, misses the wheel lock, and nearly gives Roland a path around the counter. Gus slams the rack in straight. Sunita jams a pry bar through the lower frame, and I drive the loose end of the chair into the gap between counter and wall until Roland's weight pins there. He keeps pushing. He does not stop. Leah throws me the maintenance chain. I go over the rack, around the counter leg, and through the office door handle still hanging on 1 screw. Then Sunita seats the pry bar deeper, and all of it holds at once. Nobody in the anchor makes noise for several seconds after we contain him again. The only sounds are the scraping from the pinned chair and Dana's boy crying into her coat, trying hard not to let the sound out. Curtis backs away from the barrier with a shallow cut across his palm from the rack wire and looks at it like it is about to decide his next 12 hours. Leah grabs his hand before he can touch anything else, floods the cut with clean water from a marked bottle, and checks the line under lantern light. Wire cut, not teeth, not direct contact. She says it out loud for every ear around us, then she tapes it and sends him to wash again. Roland keeps working against the chain, face half trapped between the bent chair frame and the service counter edge. We do not try another room. We do not go near him again with a fresh pair of hands. Sunita adds 2 more screws to the rack brace while he is inches away. When she is done, she says the whole fitting room corridor is now dead space. Nobody sleeps anywhere near it from this point on. I agree, and move the bedding farther towards stock and receiving. The failed quarantine breaks whatever soft edges were left in the group. Wanda starts asking for assigned watch zones instead of waiting to be told. Jeanette stops being the cleaner and becomes the person controlling waste, mop water, and what cloth gets reused for what. Rena asks Piper for a calorie count instead of a snack count. Joel keeps trying to argue that his brother might still be alive somewhere in West Service, but now he says it quieter, seeing what our own side can turn into without warning. Trevor works trash duty with his jaw clenched and finally does it without stealing more stock. Dana asks for a hammer and starts helping Arlen reinforce bedding dividers, so her boy has less line of sight to doors. I take all of that and turn it into a written board. 4 watch sectors. Water by measure, not by feel. Food at set windows. 1 latrine corner for urine containers. 1 sealed station for solid waste until we can work a safer disposal route. Dirty boots stay on the tile strip near receiving. Anything from outside the perimeter gets bagged, checked, and logged. When I finish writing, the board looks ugly and plain. That is fine. Pretty systems fail when people are tired. We do not make it to evening before the dockyard becomes too tempting to ignore. Water remains thin. Heat is now a question mark tied to whatever is left in the building's emergency systems. Leah tells me she has enough first aid stock for cuts, sprains, and 1 more decent burn treatment. Then she is down to improvised wraps and whatever we find. Sunita wants forklift propane from the yard if the cage is intact. Gus wants pallet water if any delivery got left in the wrong bay during the first rush. I go up to the roof edge above the truck court again, with binoculars scavenged from the sporting goods back room. The same trailers are there. The same box truck sits crooked. Near Bay 3, I now see a shrink-wrapped pallet with clear plastic cases under it. water, or close enough to it to be worth the risk. The yard remains quiet. That does not make it safe. It only means no one has made enough sound there yet. I take Gus, Sunita, Felix, and Wanda this time. Wanda knows food delivery labels and can tell dry stock from waste faster than I can. The dock sequence starts clean and turns bad in layers. First, we open the inner receiving door with almost no noise and check the truck court through the wired glass. Clear. Then Gus cycles the personnel door in Bay 2, and we step into air cold enough to bite through the gloves. The concrete outside is slick in patches where old slush froze and thawed. Bay 3's pallet is water, half-liter cases under shrink wrap, 2 layers high, with one torn corner where a forklift tine punched through before whatever stopped the shift outside. Sunita heads straight for the propane cage and finds 2 cylinders full, 1 empty, and a chain she can cut later with the right wheel. Felix and Wanda start hauling cases from the pallet to the hand truck. I move to the crooked box truck and check the partly open rear door, flour, boxed syrup, and 1 case of powdered drink mix. Useful, bulky, loud if dropped. We take what we can carry without making a full operation of it. That is the plan until I hear 3 taps on metal from above my head. I look up at the top of the box truck and see a gloved hand lifting over the roof edge. Then a face. Woman, maybe late 30s, knit cap pulled low, cheeks raw from cold. 1 finger pressed to her lips before I can say a word. Beside her, farther back on the truck roof, another person is curled under a moving blanket. Not dead. Moving. The woman points toward the outer service lane, then toward the low loading ramp wall. I crouch and ease to the corner. Beyond the wall, out near the trailer line, 3 listeners are moving between parked equipment. Not many. Close enough that 1 shouted name would pull them all to the truck. The woman on the roof leans down and whispers that they have been up there since before dawn. She says the man beside her fell getting onto the truck and cannot put weight on 1 leg. She asks if we are inside the mall. I do not answer that. I ask if either one is bitten. She says no, then adds that the man split his scalp on the truck rail and has blood dried down 1 side of his face. That answer gives me nothing for free. Gus comes over when he sees where I am looking, and the whole decision lands there in the truck court with cold air cutting through every pause. We can leave them. That keeps our perimeter cleaner and our load lighter. It also puts 2 thinking people within sight of our dock, which means if they live long enough, they now know this side of the mall has activity. Or we can bring them to the inner gate and treat them as quarantine until Leah says more. That means sound, delay, another wound in the building, and 2 extra mouths before sunset. Wanda does not weigh in. She keeps working the water cases with her face set forward. Sunita says if the ones on the roof start yelling when we leave, the yard is lost anyway. She is right. I tell the woman to stay down, keep the blanket over the injured man, and say nothing until I bring the hand truck around. Her eyes water from the wind or the strain of holding quiet. She nods once. Getting them off the truck costs more noise than I want, and less than it could have. The woman's name is June Ellison. The injured man is Victor Shah. Victor is big enough that 1 bad transfer would put all his weight on the leg and drop him off the rail. Gus climbs first. I brace below, and June lowers Victor down while trying not to let his boot scrape the truck wall. He clenches his jaw hard enough to make his face shake but does not yell. The scalp cut has dried into his collar, and there is a split along the outer thigh of his work pants where he must have hit the rail on the way up. Leah is not here. I only know what I see. No visible bite. 1 leg likely broken or badly sprained. Blood on the face old, not fresh. We get him onto the hand truck over folded blankets and start moving toward Bay 2. That is when 1 of the water cases slips from Felix's gloves and explodes across the concrete. Bottles roll under the trailers, bouncing off steel supports in a sound that fills the truck court end to end. Everything changes direction at once after that noise. The 3 listeners in the outer lane turn, then 2 more appear from behind the trailer line, where I never saw them. 1 bangs shoulder first into the side of the box truck and reaches for the rolling bottles. Another heads straight toward the open bay door. I send Wanda and Felix through with the first water load, while Sunita and Gus take Victor between them. June stays on his left side with 1 hand on the blanket and 1 on the wall, whispering for him to step, then not to step, then to hold. I back toward the door with the pry bar low, not swinging unless I have no better option. The first listener reaches the threshold just as Gus gets Victor's hand truck through the inner shadow of Bay 2. I shove the pry bar crosswise into the frame and use the swinging door itself to drive the body sideways into the dock bumper. Sunita drags the hand truck clear. Felix yanks the chain. The door slams. Something hits the metal from outside, so hard the bar jumps in my hands. Then Gus gets the chain through and the dock becomes a wall again. June and Victor do not cross into the main anchor. They go straight into the receiving cage nearest Bay 2, after Leah and I turn it into a quarantine pen with blankets, one water bottle, and a work light on low. Leah checks Victor first. His leg is not open, knee swollen, ankle twisted, likely damage above both from the fall. The scalp cut needs cleaning and closure strips. June has no visible contact wounds, but one palm scraped raw and 2 fingers too cold to bend well. Leah asks about bites, blood spray, mouths, eyes, open skin. June answers clean. Victor answers slower, partly from pain and partly from trying not to sound afraid in front of strangers. I listen more to what he says than how. No story holes, no dramatic gaps. They had been unloading a distribution truck at a big box store south of the mall when the first rush spilled through the receiving lane. Their crew split. A few ran for their trucks. A few went down in the lane. June and Victor took the first vehicle that moved, got boxed in by abandoned cars near our service road, then cut on foot across the outer lots before taking the truck roof when the yard filled with movement. That matches what I saw from the roof. It does not make them safe. It makes them possible. The yard does not calm after we close the bay. The water case spill and the door slam have given the listeners a new point to investigate. Through the wired glass, I count 7 near the trailers and at least 4 more drifting in from the service lane behind them. Not a horde, enough to ruin quiet yard work for the rest of the day. Gus finishes dragging the last of the water cases inside and says bay work is over until dark or cold takes more of them outside. Sunita hates giving up the propane cage. I can see it in how she keeps looking toward the chain she did not get to cut. I hate it too. We leave with the pallet water we pulled, the flour and syrup from the box truck, 1 injured outsider, 1 cold outsider, and more attention on our dock than we had at dawn. That is not a clean win. It is the kind of win this place offers now. One that solves 2 problems and starts 3 more. Back inside the anchor, the presence of June and Victor splits the room in under 5 minutes. Joel says they should be turned back out if space is tight. Dana says out loud that if her son had been stranded on a truck roof, she would pray for somebody to open a door. Piper does not argue feelings. She asks me what ration line to use for quarantined outsiders if they stay the night. Jeanette wants to know who cleans the receiving cage if Victor cannot use the bucket alone. Leah says Victor is not using any shared space until morning, maybe longer, and that settles the sanitation piece for now. I do not put it to a vote. Votes take time and time makes rooms loud. I say June and Victor stay in the receiving quarantine until Leah clears them for any move deeper. Food and water go through 1 point only. No private conversations at the cage. No one borrows their story and turns it into rumor. Wanda sends one of the bakery girls over with a folded blanket anyway. I let it go. There is a line between control and cruelty. I do not need to cross it every hour to prove I am in charge. The next strain comes from heat. With more people, damp clothing, and a live quarantine cage near the receiving side, the anchor air changes. The back stock hall holds warmth better than the front, but the floor near the dock stays cold and starts wicking through blankets laid there too long. Gus checks the mechanical closet and comes back with bad news. The anchor air is running off a reduced emergency schedule and one backup loop that depends on power still feeding through a central system elsewhere in the mall. If the main building systems fail, or if the automated controls start shedding load, our heat drops with them. Sunita says the portable maintenance generator in the lower service bay could run lights and chargers for a while. Maybe a small heater, but not without fuel and not without noise. Noise means more listeners at the dock and maybe the front as well if the vent carry changes again. I make the call to hold the generator in reserve until someone is shivering so hard he or she cannot function. Everyone hears the decision. No one likes it. That is fine. Comfortable people make sloppy noise. Leah finally gets a minute to sit and write her own shortage list. Pain relief low, burn gel low, sterile dressing low, antibiotic ointment almost gone, tape holding, gauze fair, splint material improvised. I ask what she can stretch from tenant stock before we gamble on a full pharmacy run. She says beauty stores carry some bandages and disinfectant, but mostly junk for our needs. The first aid kiosk gave her a start, not depth. The best chance is the actual mall pharmacy on the west upper side near family services. Locked steel gate, prescription stock inside. She says she is not chasing narcotics or anything fancy. She wants saline, dressing packs, tape, anti-inflammatories, closure strips, and whatever antibiotics are left on the non-prescription shelf. I look at Felix's shoulder bruise, Victor's leg in the receiving cage, Harpreet's wrapped forearm, Curtis's taped palm, and the bruises starting to bloom across Joel's ribs. Then, I look at the route map already dirtied from the bakery run. West again, same side of the mall, same service network with one more reason for people to get careless. I do not answer on the spot. I pin the list beside the route board and let everyone see it. By late afternoon, the building gives me another warning that the wider mall is changing without our permission. A far-off clang rolls through the service side, deep and low, not close enough to be our dock or front barrier. 10 seconds later comes a second metal report, and then a shivering rattle that travels through the vents. Not random impact, not a body brushing a shutter, something heavier. Gus looks up from the water count and says, loading dock somewhere west or central. Sunita says maybe a trailer settling in the cold. Then the same sound comes again, followed by voices too distant to make out words. Human voices, not ours. We kill our own talk and listen. The voices stop. A minute later, there is one short burst of something mechanical. Maybe a chain dragged over concrete, or a pallet jack dropped hard. Then nothing. I do not send anybody toward it. Not in failing light. Not with the dockyard hot and the quarantine corridor half dead. But I circle the sound area on the map. We are not the only organized people using this mall anymore. Dark takes the building back fast once the weak daylight fades off the blanket wall and the emergency lights reclaim the stock hall. I cut our own light another step and turn the store into zones by lantern only. Sleeping zone low light. Intake desk 1 work lamp hooded with a coat. Medical station 1 lantern and no chatter. Receiving cage dim enough that June and Victor can rest without broadcasting our whole rear hall through the glass. Piper hands out the first full ration under the new grid. Crackers, 1 small sweet, water by measured cup, and half portions for anybody who ate from bakery stock during the rescue return. Nobody cheers. Nobody complains loudly either. That is something. Dana coaxes her boy to swallow dry crackers 1 bite at a time, and wraps him in 2 department store coats that once sold for more money than most of us had in our pockets that morning. Joel volunteers for first watch without looking at me. I put him on second instead. A man trying to pay back a mistake in the first hour is a man likely to make a second. I make 1 more round before I sit. Front barrier secure, fitting room dead zone secure, with Roland still pinned in the collapsed office and the chain holding under the counter brace. Dock hall, quiet except for 1 scrape from outside Bay 2 every few minutes, where a listener is still checking the metal. Receiving quarantine stable. June asleep against the cage wall with her boots still on. Victor awake, watching the shadows and trying not to ask how bad the mall looks beyond our anchor. Leah is dozing at the desk over her shortage list with 1 hand still on the pen. Gus is in the mechanical closet sketching door and vent notes onto the back of an advertising poster. Sunita is seated on the floor by a milk crate full of screws, sorting them by length with a small coffee can between her knees. When she looks up, she says, "The west sounds are not good." I say I know. She says if another group is working the docks, they will find our side sooner or later. I say I know that too. Then I take the map, circle the west loading lanes again, and write 1 line beside it so I do not let myself ignore the truth in the morning. Territory begins at a door somebody else decides to test. And that's where we'll stop for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me how the story hit you, what moments worked, what didn't, and what you'd want to hear next. And a big thank you to everyone supporting the channel. You keep this project alive. Until next time, Survivor. Jack's Nightmares, signing off.